Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Woo, welcome
Let's go.
back, traders. How are we
I wake up
doing
to a little
today?
bit of
We have
drool
an
on my pillow
absolutely
flex.
beautiful video going over AMC, Gamestop, as well as the GME warrants, talking about a couple different things in the broader market, as well as some news on AMC. But before we get into that, guys, look at where we are. 1691. We just saw that thing go up by one. If you guys could please make this 1700, it would mean a lot. You know, if you're watching this, you like the passion, subscribe, and let's get into the AMC due diligence, right? So Adam Aaron said AMC has proudly secured the rights to the 2026 FIFA World Cup with intense interest in football among potential Latino theater visitors. AMC will air the Telemundo broadcast in Spanish language. What you will see, great sporting action. What you will hear is goal, right? So pretty baller move by Adam Aaron. I think that'll actually be very successful. And as you continue to think about new ways to bring in top line revenue, I love using theatrical events as well as sporting events, right? I think that is a huge level to be unlocked, and it has huge potential. When you think about, oh, I could go with my friends to a movie theater, imagine how that theater is going to erupt, right? When there's a goal from Spain against Portugal, right? That is going to be amazing. But jumping into the technical analysis here, guys, on AMC, seeing a little bit of a boom candle in the overnight trading, you could see just how dangerously close you are to a breakout. And traders, there's an exciting part of this news, right? When you go to the 4-hour chart, you have officially broken out of this down-sloping channel. Now, this is a bullish channel, commonly referred to as a bull trend after a huge move up, right? So you saw it almost, what was this move? If you count the after hours move here, this was a 135% move, right? That's no laughing matter. For people that said that this thing was dead at 93 cents, well, those people got dusted, right? And now you're beginning to see some bullish momentum take course on the stock. On the 4-hour chart, you can already look and see you have a golden cross on the 4-hour. You have a bullish pennant that you broke out of. And as well as that, right, you take a little peeky weeky at the potential price target of this thing from the 4-hour. If you do the dirty, right, if you do the move that would be anticipated from this breakout, you should expect to see this thing around $2.90 to $3 sometime in the near future. And that's not even the most exciting part of this. Before we get into the most exciting part, guys, just look at the 4-hour MACD. That is the one thing that is slightly bearish here, and you can turn that green, but you've had a down crossing momentum swing on the 4-hour MACD. Now, this is a good example, right? You just made a little blip low before bouncing after getting this down cross, but typically AMC is pretty accurate with the 4-hour MACD. So seeing that, of course, right, not a good sign, but the overall picture being painted here is much more bullish than bearish, in my opinion, right? I'm not a financial advisor. Do not say or do things based off of what we talk about here, but I cannot contain my excitement for AMC and the way that the setup looks, right? You have phonies like Matt Kors, Trace Trades, right? I mean, people who have abandoned this stock, but we are remaining covering it because this stock is one of the best communities in retail sake that I've ever seen. And it actually got me into the stock market. So I freaking love it, right? And I have a lot of respect for this community. On the daily time frame, you see this channel a little bit easier and the fake out breakout here on the daily. Now, you have a daily MACD cross that is in the works of happening, as well as you've broken, right, this previous downtrend in volume on the way up here. So there is some promise here that you might see volume begin to ramp up, hopefully, as this daily MACD crosses green and you get a bounce out of this channel. Top resistances, right? Pay attention. Top resistances to watch for are going to be the following. 175. 175 is going to be critical resistance on the daily time frame. As you can see here, you have had multiple touches against it. right? This was your first rejection, big rejection down from 175 all the way down to 150. This was your second touch all the way down to 140. Third touch during earnings that we called out all the way down to 120. And then now you're going to have the opportunity to go back up to 175 once again. Your second resistance, traders, that I'm watching heavily is the most exciting one at 194, traders. This was our all-time goal for AMC on the daily time frame, is to get back above the 200-day EMA, as you have not successfully done that, traders. As seen here, big rejection. You have not successfully done that since all the way back in 2022, right? This is the only time that you successfully closed above the 200. Everyone was going crazy. FOMO was wild, and then AMC ape, right? And you saw the stock really become stagnant as you were anchored to a preferred share. Seeing the stock now, right? You're set up in a way in which you can get back above the 200-day pretty easily, right? Even if you play out this target of that $2.90 to $3 horizontal resistance, you're well above the 200. And at that point, you have the 50 EMA sloping upwards. It makes for a very nice trajectory trend of a potential daily golden cross for the first time since, I know we've looked at it multiple times, but February 1st, 2021. If you guys are wondering, go do your own due diligence, right? Go check out what the stock looks like back then. We've done multiple videos on it. But that would be the biggest technical landmark since that point. So I just want to make sure we cover that on the daily time frame. On the weekly time frame, you made a bullish freaking engulfing, guys. And it doesn't get much better than this on AMC when you talk about a breakout. Now, even though you're only up, you lost 1.5% in over hours trading, this weekly bullish engulfing candle speaks for itself, right? Typically, when you see them on AMC, you see multiple candles to follow, right? And you don't get many on AMC. You really, really do not. When you see a distinctive move down, oftentimes, that's a beautiful morning star right there. Oftentimes, you do not see them follow through. That's a kind of a good example, right? You're a little short of the bottom wick there, but a bullish engulfing is when the whole body of the candle engulfs the entire previous. That's a hammer candle. What's a good example? That's a beautiful example, right? So even if it's not long-term bounce, this candle went from a close of 430 all the way up until 5. You're expecting short-term relief in the next week, unless SPY pukes, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But unless SPY pukes or IWM dumps, you look nice going into next week. Now, talking about AMC on TradingView, right? This is a very different picture. This is the macro chart on the weekly. You have this very obvious channel that you were in, and we talked about it a couple different times, right? But you are now not only above this channel, right? You saw bounce, bounce, rejection, 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 bounce, 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 and then finally a huge bounce off of that channel. But you're rejecting here. And this resistance currently at about 170 is also going to be pretty tremendous, as this is almost a falling wedge formation, guys. Now let's say we delete this just to make it a little bit more clear of a picture. There is still the opportunity here to go lower, right? If you fail this breakout, there's an opportunity to go to 82 cents. Now, that's your worst case scenario on AMC, but that would be, hopefully, fingers crossed, a touch of bullish div as you would make a lower low, but then hopefully a higher low on the RSI. And that would be your telltale signal that this is the bottom on AMC. Now, where is the bottom? I think we've already made it, right? I think it's pretty comfortable to say that it's likely that 93 cents was your bottom, especially with the formation here of this shoulder, head, right shoulder. If it's not, though, right, plan for the worst and hope for the best. We're bulls here, right? But there's no denying that that's possible. On the monthly time frame, you have a little bit of a crazy, crazy candle, right? This was the monthly candle that engulfed 2.5 candlesticks. That's bullish, right? You're now seeing a doji consolidation candle. So you're seeing consolidation at higher levels, traders. This is bullish, even though you could see this as hesitation before going higher. As long as you see volume come into the stock, you could even push this to close around 163. And for me, that would tell us that we're automatically going back to $2, right? That would be the most bullish scenario, is if you close this back-to-back bullish monthlies as a bullish engulfing and then also a bullish hammer candle. For anyone saying that this stock does not look nice on the technical charts, at least right on the short-term time frame, just look at the last 2 months, right? Look at the last 2 months of trading. It's bullish. It just is, right? Anyone who tells you otherwise is just really just hating where they don't have to. On the quarterly time frame, you have a very unique opportunity to also create a bullish engulfing candle. This would mean the tell-all of tell-all candles, right? You have not had a bullish engulfing on AMC since back here, and you saw just how much more it extended, right? If you get a bullish engulfing on the quarterly, I expect this to be your macro breakout on AMC. Going into AMC on the quarterly time frame for the MACD traders, the quarterly MACD is one of my favorite macro change indicators. Just look at how it affected you back here. I'm a big nerd when it comes to technical analysis. I am. And you look at previous historical trends based off of the cross of this indicator. Well, we have one cross down, and you went from 123 down to $10, and then you had one cross up. You went from $10 all the way up to 393. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen, right? There's no guaranteeing where this thing goes off to. But if you see a cross here on the green side, traders, and a bullish engulfing on the quarterly time frame, I will hard press anyone who wants to doubt this thing in the next 6 months, right? I will, because the technical analysis would be set up for a nice rally, potentially upwards of $10, right? Your previous all-time low. Hopefully you catch a bid, a higher low, and then you're going into your gap fills. Your gap fill at $13, your gap fill at $19, and your gap fill all the way up at $43. Now, it's not going to look like this, right? Everyone always draws the this kind of what it's going to look like chart. It's not going to look like that, right? It could be a nasty double bottom. It could be a very cumulative, slow-moving cup and handle. But one thing is almost always certain with AMC. You see volatility when this thing runs. So that's where it's exciting, genuinely. I think that's what I have for AMC on Webull. Let's just take a little peeky-weeky at the daily time frame because I want to see the RSI on TradingView. The RSI on TradingView, you have a little bit of a shoulder, head, right shoulder here on TradingView. So even if, traders, you come back down to test the 50 line and you bounce, right, with strong volume, strong momentum, there's a strong possibility that this thing sees a rally out of here, right? Because not only do you, on the short-term frame, have this shoulder, head, right shoulder potentially, right, marking your higher low, but you also have this breakout that we talked about in our previous videos on AMC. This was a breakout of a daily falling wedge on the RSI. These are powerful, these are slept on, and boy do they work, right? We called it out back here when you began to break out, and that was your low. You saw a 6% candle, 0% candle, an 11% candle, a 2% candle, and then a blow off top. I'd be hard pressed to have you find a YouTuber who is calling stuff out like this on AMC on the regularly, right? So if you guys find value on this, slap the subscribe button, get me up to 1700, right? That's our goal, 1700 for the day, and we'll continue covering, right? Try to bring back the retail revolution, and hopefully help some people along the way, right? That's all you can want to do. Talking about GameStop, in the last week, traders, you saw an inside bar off of this 11% down candle, and you've seen the volume pretty much run dry here. I would not be surprised to see this thing go pretty ballistic next week, depending on what happens with the news. But we're going to have to wait and see, right? Because this volume will not go down forever. You will see some kind of macro break on the volume profile. However, you did see a rejection of the 200-day EMA, but you also saw an inverted hammer candle. So you have a little bit of indecision between the bears and the bulls. And it's very clear here that if you are going to find a bottom, right, this would be a pretty decent place to do it. And I say that because of the candlestick formation. I say that because of the overall trend on GameStop is typically you'll get to the low 20s, and then you'll bounce to the high 20s, and then the low 20s, and then the high 20s, and then the low 20s, and then the high 20s, and then the low 20s, and then the high 20s, and then the low 20s, and then the high 20s, and then the low 20s, and then the high 20s, and then the low 20s. So you get the trend. I mean, you understand that this thing is probably going to maybe make a little bit lower of a low and then go to the high 20s. That has just been the trend on GameStop. And truthfully, until we get some kind of fundamental news or a potential share equity offering, this thing is not going to move like we want it to. It's just not. You have a lot of decision making for Ryan Cohen as he deploys the cash that they are sitting on, right? This man is a maniac, probably about up $1 billion on GameStop. I'm not even joking, right? Not GameStop, probably up about $1 billion on eBay. I wish I was joking, because you look at eBay stock, and eBay is just going absolutely ballistic, right? Making another all-time high last week at 119. You're telling me this man who was buying all throughout here isn't deeply in the green? Yeah, I don't believe you, right? Right? I mean, it's very clear and obvious. This was a very beautiful falling broadening wedge. The breakout from that takes you to about Tendy Town, right? You've actually about hit your price target on that breakout. So what it does next, hey, hands off the table. But that will inevitably determine what's going to happen with GME. IWM, I so badly want to talk about IWM, and then we'll get into the GME warrants for my guy, Only in Paradise, because I promise this man every single day, even if we're covering NEO, that I will cover the GME warrants. Because why not, right? I think it's funny. IWM. We have a serious conversation on our hands, traders. And I know even though I may be talking about tech stocks, crypto, right, I want to do right by my overall thesis, right? That is short cap stocks are going to outperform the S&P 500 in the near future. And that is what's happening, right? IWM currently at 288 traders in the overall overnight markets. That is a clearing of this previous high. And as long as you can hold this move, right? You're right at the high in the 4-hour chart. That includes overnight trading. But as long as you can clear this move, traders, you have invalidated your bearish setup for a potential shoulder, head, right shoulder. And that, I think that bodes well, not just for AMC, GameStop, the small cap stocks, NEO. Right, so if you're a NEO holder and you see IWM clearing its previous all-time high, that is likely, right, when you look at NEO stock, that this thing's going to find a bounce as well. And we'll cover that tomorrow, NEO. But this is very, very positive for an overall trajectory move upwards of $300. Right, I know we have it drawn up somewhere. I think it is TradingView. It is TradingView, right? So we have this very accumulative break of the horizontal trend, retest, spring. And if you've cleared that top, traders, there's no reason that you don't go into this newfound kind of crossing resistance here. You have two different resistances crossing at $300 or $298 to be exact. And those resistances are the following, right? This top in 2025 October, this top in 26 January, as well as these two local tops, both intersect up here. So I think it's very likely if you clear this top that you're going at least, right, on the index up another 5%, which would clear our macro thesis. What happens next? God knows, right? Anything can happen. but I would be so happy just to get that right, because we were calling for that, traders, all the way back here. Probably even here, right? We were saying 300, 300, 300 on IWM. That's around $140 short. I take that back. Math is hard. About $100 short of where it was, right? And now you're seeing the potential to cross the daily RSI band. It looks beautiful, guys. It really does. And that, I mean, I'm excited about it. Looking at IWM on Webull, you had beautiful bullish volume on the last week, which breaks the drought in volume, right? You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, guys, 9 weeks of decreasing volume as you saw this thing shoot to the moon. I had weekly hammer candle after touching the 9-day EMA is a very strong confirmation bounce that should lead you upwards of $300, in my opinion, right? Not financial advice, but that looks very nice. On SPY, I wanted to cover SPY as well because I think there's a very real conversation to be had. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks in a row of green on decreasing volume. I don't know how sustainable this is. So do your own due diligence, right? It feels like it's very much in this grind up. Even if we have one of these kind of 5% dips, I believe in the macro trajectory. But I'll continue to cover anything that would make me think otherwise every single day. So I think that's all I got besides for the warrants on GME. I almost signed out without doing the warrants. That's funny. GME warrants, only in paradise, my man. On the weekly time frame, you close an inverted bullish hammer candle, very similar to Gamestop, right? But what you're starting to see here is a more structured formation on this thing, right? So you could almost say that this is a bullish pennant, depending on how you want to draw this, right? And there's really no gauge on this thing. There really isn't, because like, what's this move? What's the profit target? I mean, right? But on the weekly time frame, you're beginning to get some kind of structure on the GME warrants. One thing is for sure, you break above 370, you will see problems, right? You'll see problems to the upside. People will not be able to hold this thing down. On the weekly time frame, you still have this shoulder, head, right shoulder. It doesn't look too promising, but it is possible to play out with the neckline currently sitting at 370. So if you break 370, that's technical confluence right there. It's likely you go up to test for schmeckles, right? $4. And if you see that happen, anything's on the table, but this thing is starting to look a little bit more juicy, or at least juicier than I would have anticipated, right? On the daily time frame, we'll cover that, and then we're out. On the daily time frame, you are currently below the 50-day EMA, below the 200 and the 9. Not great, right? You saw a down day of 3%, and you barely closed on top of this uptrend. If you can't hold this uptrend, it's probably Jover, right? You're probably cooked. It's probably going to double bottom at 318. I know I'm being a little sarcastic here, but 318 would be your next stop shop. Not the worst case scenario. But yeah, I think that's all I got, traders. I hope you guys found this valuable. If you did, please punch the like button, drop kick the subscribe button, and hopefully, right, if you guys enjoyed, I'll see you in the next video. God bless you and your families. And remember, guys, the best is yet to come. I believe it.